After my father's funeral, the moment I dreaded came with a chilling immediacy. My mother, without a hint of hesitation, launched into her plans. I'm going to take all of Dad's $184,000 inheritance now that caregiving is over. You're useless to me. Haha, please leave right now, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The harshness of her words was staggering. How could she speak like that, so cold, right after the funeral? In that instant, I could feel her hopelessness. But deep down, I had already braced for this moment long before my father passed. With a calm confidence, I gave her a smile, one that reflected years of preparation, and simply replied, "Thank you. I've been waiting for this." I am Susan, 28 years old, still living in the house I grew up in. My father was the shining light in my life. He ran a company, a demanding job, yet always found time for family dinners and school events. His love and support meant everything to me. But my mother? She was a different story. She never really showed affection, not like my father. My childhood wasn't easy, especially with my paternal grandparents living under the same roof. My mother often vented her frustrations, directing her anger at me when my father and grandparents weren't around. It was always me who bore the brunt of her bitterness. My grandmother, though kind on the surface, had moments of cruelty. She often made cutting remarks, expressing her disappointment over not having a son to carry on the family legacy. No matter how hard I tried to earn my mother's approval, through academic success, or even by winning swimming competitions, her criticism only deepened. She would comment on my appearance, always comparing me unfavorably to my father, the one she adored. I never measured up. My mother's beauty and past as a model seemed so out of place with the person she became after marrying my father. I suppose she married him for his wealth, but the life of luxury she had imagined never materialized, especially with my grandparents still in the picture. After they passed away, things worsened. With no one left to hold her accountable, my mother squandered my father's money on lavish parties, completely neglecting me and the household responsibilities. Meanwhile, my father threw himself into rebuilding his company's stock value, leaving me to deal with the growing isolation and loneliness. But through it all, I learned to navigate the treacherous world of adults, especially someone like my mother. I learned early on how to defend myself, to understand the games people play. So, when my father passed away, I was ready to stand up and claim what was rightfully mine. But there was a part of me that couldn't confront him about my mother's behavior. I saw how hard he worked. The last thing I wanted was to burden him further with my problems. My goals were clear: attend a prestigious university, work for the family business, and someday take it over. I didn't want to be like my mother, coasting through life without contributing anything. So, I dedicated myself to hard work, inching toward my aspirations. As the years went by, my father's business stabilized, and he was thrilled to hear about my plans to join him. I interned at his company during my third year of university. The employees were patient, kind, and taught me the ins and outs of the business. After graduation, I officially became a full-time employee. My relationship with my mother, however, remained distant. The office became my refuge, the corporate world a place where I could bury myself in work and forget the chaos at home. My father, though a strict boss, always balanced his role with tenderness, offering me guidance and care even in the most professional settings. But then everything changed. My father suffered a terrible leg injury in an accident, requiring constant care. The responsibility fell on me. I had no choice but to return home, setting aside my feelings toward my mother for the sake of my father's well-being. Despite her harsh words, I refused to let them break me. I focused on caring for my father, balancing the demands of the company with the urgency of his recovery. Even in a wheelchair, my father's mind remained sharp, leading the company from afar, giving instructions over the phone and attending meetings only when necessary. He expressed his gratitude often, even apologizing for the burden he thought he was placing on me. I reassured him, "It's fine, Dad. I still have so much to learn from you." As I cared for him, my father passed on lessons in management, as if he knew his time was running out. When the doctors told us he had cancer and only had a year to live, I was shattered. But I couldn't let it break me. I spent even more time with him, visiting daily as his condition worsened. His health deteriorated rapidly, and one day, in the quiet moments of his struggle, he entrusted me with the company. "I've taught you a lot, Susan," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I trust you with the company. I'm counting on you for everything after I'm gone." I promised him that I would protect his legacy, both the man and the business he built. A week later, he passed away, surrounded by loved ones and employees who had become like family. My mother, however, was notably absent, having visited him just once during his illness. Her indifference shocked me, but I refused to confront her at the funeral. I knew it would be futile. As I stood in the midst of my grief, one thought consumed me: I would uphold my promise to my father, no matter what. The company he worked so tirelessly to build would be protected. And if my mother dared to shed crocodile tears in front of my father's friends, I wouldn't hesitate to put her in her place. Even as she pretended to mourn, her behavior couldn't mask the coldness inside. It was all too obvious. After my father's funeral, it became painfully clear to me just how hollow my mother's emotions were. Mourning? Not for her. The only thing that seemed to stir any emotion in her was the glittering promise of my father's inheritance. It was as if his death had only opened a door to a life of wealth she'd long fantasized about, and now, she intended to walk through it without hesitation. Before the final prayers had even settled, she made her move, stepping toward me with an icy smile that barely concealed her true intentions. "I'm going to take all of Dad's $1,984,000 inheritance," she said, her voice sharp and devoid of compassion. "Now that caregiving is over, you're useless to me. Ha! Please leave right now." Her words were like a slap across my face, so stark in their cruelty, so sudden in their venom, that I almost couldn't process them. I stood frozen for a moment, disbelief washing over me. To say something so callous, so utterly heartless, right after the funeral? I shook my head. But I wasn't going to let her see my shock. No, I'd seen this coming. Years of manipulation had prepared me for this. I had already steeled myself for her outrageous demands. With a calm, almost eerie smile, I looked her in the eye and replied, "Thank you. I've been waiting for this." Her eyes widened, but I wasn't fazed. I was already beyond her reach. As I packed my belongings, only taking what was necessary, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. I turned to her and said, "I'm going to sell all my stuff. You can do whatever you want with the house and the inheritance. I don't need anything else. I'm going to live and enjoy life to the fullest." The mocking laughter that followed only fueled my resolve. Her grip on me was weakening with every word I said. With one last glance at the woman who had never shown me the love I deserved, I walked out the door. A month passed, and my phone buzzed incessantly. It was her, of course. Reluctantly, I picked up. "Why did you leave the house?" she demanded, her voice filled with accusation. I didn't hesitate, allowing myself a small, teasing smirk. "Oh, that's because I inherited the house," I replied casually. "Dad left it to me, not you. I sold it for about $1 billion. Her response was as I'd expected, a mixture of disbelief and panic. "$1 billion? It sold for that much?" she exclaimed. But I couldn't find it in me to care about her shock. I was done with her manipulation. "Well, it doesn't matter," I said coolly. "I still have the $1,984,000 inheritance." With that, I hung up, the sound of her confusion fading into the background as I embraced my newfound freedom. The weight she had carried on my shoulders for so long was finally gone. But she wasn't going to take this lying down. My mother's surprise quickly morphed into desperation. "Of course, you haven't received the inheritance yet," I told her bluntly. "Remember when you fought with Dad and handed him the divorce papers? Well, he kept them. He used them to divorce you before he passed, making sure you'd get nothing." Her face went pale, and I could almost hear the reality crashing into her like a tidal wave. I didn't wait for her to collect herself. "Your spending sprees and reliance on that inheritance? That's over. "You'll have to work for the rest of your life now," I informed her, my voice matter of fact. Her response? Predictable. She demanded I provide for her, buy her a new house, and find her a high-ranking position in the company. I scoffed at her audacity. "Did you ever do anything for me?" I shot back, my anger rising. "Don't bring up the parent-child relationship now. I don't even think of you as my mother anymore. Our bond is severed. Live your life however you want, but it's no longer my responsibility." With that, I cut all contact. I blocked her number, set my phone to reject her calls, and instructed the company reception to report her whenever she showed up unannounced. Meanwhile, my work became my sanctuary. It was hard, challenging, but it was mine. The company my father had built, the legacy he had entrusted to me, it was now my duty to protect it. Every decision, every innovation, I made it my own. I refused to simply follow in his footsteps. I was determined to forge my own path, to lead the company to new heights. As for my mother, I could only watch from a distance as her world crumbled. No longer able to rely on her past ways, she was forced to work part-time jobs just to keep up with her bills. It was a bitter irony. After all her years of living off my father's success, she now faced the consequences of her selfishness. But I didn't look back. Instead, I poured myself into my work, knowing that my true reward lay not in material things, but in continuing the legacy my father had so carefully nurtured. I would honor his memory and build something of my own. And in doing so, I would become the leader he always knew I could be.